Okay, here we go again. Isn't there a song about that? Anyways, today I have a 2010 F-150 5.4 liter 3-valve that of course needs a right-hand exhaust manifold gasket on it. What happens is the two rear studs on cylinder 4, they pop off of there, they break off, and they create an exhaust leak. The manifold warps out a little bit back there, and the exhaust leak ensues. Now, what happens is you'll notice a tick, tick, tick type noise upon startup, faster than that obviously, until about 10, 15, 30 seconds in, and that multi-layer steel gasket expands and kind of takes up that gap in there. Now the proper fix for this is to change the manifold, the gasket, and the studs. The new studs are stainless steel, so this will not occur again. Of course, the manifold is warped at this point, so you want to change that out, and as always, new gaskets on there. Now these in the F-150 can be really difficult to change out. The newer models, I'd say 08 newer, maybe 2009 or newer, are definitely a little bit easier, but they're all definitely, it's a real pain to access anything in there. Ford actually wants you to raise the engine up and lift the engine halfway out of the vehicle to get this thing out of here. So today I'm going to show you some tips and tricks to get it out of there without raising the engine, because most of you don't have a cherry picker just sitting around like I do. Now the way this video is shot, it's more of a bullet points type video where we're going to address each one of the major talking points and problem areas of getting this manifold out and back into there. So let's take a look. Okay, now when you're taking these out, what you'll notice is that the back ones right here or even down below are the ones that are going to break, whereas the rest of them generally will come out. This is where your ticking noises come from. You got exhaust leak right in this area. Now what you want to get this big old manifold out of here is for all of these studs that come out just like this, nut and stud together, and that's the way they'll come out most times. If not, you're going to want to use a stud installer and remover and get these studs out of there. That's going to make it so much easier to get this manifold out of here in the end. So if these don't come out, these studs don't come out, you want to get them out, and then we'll start off fresh and clean that way. Now these ones are not too bad, but they're corroded enough where a 13 millimeter, which is their size, does not fit. So first thing you do is start off with a 6-point half-inch socket, and you can get them on there, and usually they'll grip just enough so you can get them out of there. Long extension, you can see coming back, down and out, something like this works best. Now a 3/8, which is this is a 3/8 drive to half-inch drive adapter, and a real long breaker bar is best for getting these out of here. Not impacts, not anything. Hand torque, half-inch drive, plenty of leverage, we'll break torque, and we'll get them loosened like this. At this point, you know, a lot of times they come out so far, I can start turning around by hand and stuff like that. This is what you want right here though. Now what I do in the F-150s is the same thing as the Explorers, the 4.6 3-valve. Pull this liner up and out of here. That way you have as much room as possible. The shock tower is still in the way, but what are you going to do? Next thing you're going to notice is right about here is there's a heat shield for the shock tower, bushings I guess, to shield it from here. You want to pull this out. There's literally 10 mil bolt right back inside of here. You see it right there? Pull that out, and this whole thing's out of the way. Again, more room to get up in here and get the rest of these. Now what I do is that one's obviously broken. We just got that one out, it's a straight shot, okay? What I'll do from top and down here is I will start to get these top ones out, the easiest ones to access, while everything else soaks with the rust penetrant, including the downpipe bolts. Now up top here, you'll notice the front two studs are kind of hard to get to. You got a shock tower in the way and stuff like that. The best you can do is 1/4-inch drive sockets and ratchets. What you want to do is use an open end, well a box end, combo wrench like this, stick it on there, and then we're going to tap it with a wrench on the end of it, and that's going to break torque on there, kind of like a hammer mechanism in an impact. And that'll break torque, and same thing, 1/2 inch instead of 13 mil, And if you have a 6-point combo box end, best to use that. So do that on the front to top here, and that'll get them broken free. And then you can use regular 1/4-inch sockets or ratchets from that point on out. And then of course there's the ever popular extended bar option here, where you take your 1/2-inch combo and you put another combo on the end of it. We get ourselves some leverage here. Now once it's broken and you have torque broken on there, you can go ahead and come up in here, like I said, with a 1/4-inch, or if the nut's good enough, you can use a gear wrench in here and get it out of here even faster. Just get it on there nice and straight, and you'll be able to get it out of there pretty quick with no space restrictions. Now what I do in all reality for these downpipe bolts here, they're such a pain, and the nut on the other side, it's not gonna look like a nut no more. They'll look like a round piece of cabbage or something, I don't know. It's just not gonna work. It's a pain to get them out of there. So what I do is I just shear off the bolt with a cutoff wheel on this top one, and for that lower one there, what I do is I use an extractor that looks a little something like this. This is a really good kit from Craftsman. Really bites into it. I'll put links down below this one. This one really bites well, even compared to the Irwin kits out there. And I get the nut off that one, okay? But this top one, gone. It's out of here. And once everything's out of the way, it's very easy to come back in here, pull this thing up, put a vice grip on here, and finish taking it off. Or in a lot of cases, I'll zing it off closer to here once this is out of the way, so it's nice and flush on there and you're not cutting into the flange on here. Both options are good, but this is the easy way to get it out of there. I should be fighting this one, because this one right here, not only is it really, you know, like rounded and rusted and worn off, it's also, you gotta come at it at an angle. You can see the cat's in the way down there. So it makes it a real pain. This is a lot easier route right here. Okay, now for these lower ones that are kind of hidden down here, of course you're going to have to pull the starter out of the way. So get that out of the way, and you can see there's a whole heck of a lot more room underneath here. Now if you have a problem pulling the starter out, you're not sure how, I do have a video on that. I'll link to it down below. Once you're up in here, this one right there I get with a universal and long extension, same as the other ones, and get that one out of there. Now this one over here, we're starting to get kind of buried in there, and the universal, you know, it gets too bound up. So you can come at this one and even this one if you want, nice and straight like this. Now what I use, I'm gonna try to get you up in there, is a 3/8 ratchet, a 3/8 to 1/4-inch adapter right there, and then a 1/4-inch to 3/8 adapter, and then of course your 1/2-inch 6-point deep well socket right there, and that'll get that one up there loose. It's just the right length. Doing it that way, I kind of show you on here. I got this one loose already. There's not much swing, but it does work. It gets it right in between the frame. You can start getting it out of there. Now for me, and most likely for you, this one, you know, the two rear ones, whoa, hold on. This one, the lower and the upper, are broken back here. So once you have this one out right there, and of course we're getting this one out right here, there's literally one more in the very front there, and this manifold will come out. Just to clarify, that socket combination is a 3/8 drive, 1/2-inch socket, 6-point. Okay, we have our 3/8 to 1/4 adapter, and then 1/4 back to 3/8 adapter, and finally your 3/8 ratchet. Now for the front lower bolts on the exhaust manifold, what you're going to want to do is use an extension and go up right next to the frame cross member there. This right here is the front differential, steering rack, okay? And let's see if I can get up inside of here.
You're going to use your extension, get up inside of there, prop yourself against the frame right here, okay? And you're going to push out against it to hold it, square it up, and then you just start turning it off of there. Let's see if I can get you a better angle. And it'll start coming that way. Same way as in the 4.6 liter 3 valve in the Explorers. This most direct route. Okay, that nasty freaking beast slug looking thing is out of the car. Look at that thing, all gnarled up. Congratulations, if you're at this point with me, that was the hardest part of the whole job, getting those bolts out, and of course getting the manifold out. Now there is a trick to getting these manifolds out. With the starter out of the way down there, what I do is I'll use this to represent the manifold because it's just too much to record with it. Is it'll come forward, it'll drop down a little bit. What I do is I drop it down into the starter well area there, get it down far enough, flatten it, and then I'll pull it right past here and out. That's the way I've always taken them out. I've never taken them out the bottom there on any of the Fords. So new or old F-150s, you should be able to do it this way. And of course having all those darn studs out of there really helps in the end. Let's see here. As you can see, I have one that's broken flush. You can see up in there, and that one right there has a little nub sticking out, so that's going to make it a lot easier. I'm going to use the inductor heater and heat that puppy cherry red and put a vice grip on there, but I might make a video so you guys can see how cool it is. Use the welder and weld a nut to one like that. That's flush. So it heats it up, and it of course provides an attachment point. We will see here. Okay, so heating this one up, and then of course using the extractor did end up pretty good, and it's coming out. So this one is not an issue. Of course the rest of them all came out. Okay, now one thing you got to realize is that, great, these are out of here, everything's extracted, the rest of them came out, but going back in, we're going to have to put in the manifold and the gaskets and then put in the studs, okay? It's gonna be a little tricky. You're fighting the manifold, you're getting it in there, and you got some weight of the manifold and stuff like that. So you want the threads as clean as possible before going back in. Okay, so what I do is I chase all the threads all the way down with either a thread chaser, or you can use your new stud, and this way you have full access to it to make sure it's going in nice and straight. What you may notice, the first couple threads a little bit tight. You get your Torx socket on here. Once it's in, and it's going in obviously straight and we're threaded correctly, and I'll go, you know, as you can see on here, like halfway in with the ratchet, and we'll get past that and we'll clean the threads. That way, in the end, and when you're going to put the manifold back in, you can do just what I did there. It's going in by hand. This way there's no chance of cross-threading it going back in. You don't want to go through all this work and then cross-thread a couple of studs, and they won't have the full bite. You can see it goes in pretty far. And the reason being is there's a lot of torque on each one of these studs. So you want to be able to bite all the way in the full thread length down there. Now as far as cleaning the manifold gasket surface here on the head, what you want to use is either Scotch-Brite or what I use is a white bristle disc from 3M, and I clean up all the carbon and rust and corrosion on here, so the new manifold sits on here nice and tight and square, and it's flat all the way across. Very important, so when you torque it down, it doesn't warp, and of course there's a perfect seal all the way around the ring there. When doing so, there's going to be some debris, either from the abrasive you're using or the stuff you're taking off. So I'll put paper towels, blue paper towels, you know, the shop towel ones, or regular ones, and I'll put them in here flush so we can keep all the debris out of the exhaust valve side there. And we'll do a final cleaning of the surface head there with brake clean and a rag a couple times, and same thing in the new manifold, and we can start reassembling and getting this back together. Now going back in, put your studs into your manifold, 2 downpipe studs. They are included with the Dorman manifold, and so the nuts are definitely upgraded from the previous model, so that's a good thing. What you do is you take the nuts and you double nut it like this. You tighten these 2 together, so you hold this one and you tighten this one to butt to that one. That makes it one with the stud, and then you simply take this one and you tighten it down and it will tighten the stud into there. Same thing on this side. Now when going out, I generally hold this one, okay, with the open end wrench, and then I'll zing this one off with an impact just so it shocks it off of there without loosening anything on here. But either way, it should work with hand tools too. Okay, now going back in, clean up the gasket surface on the head, of course, all the way down. Now some staining like this is normal, that's from pitting and rust and all that. Just get the ring around the actual exhaust port nice and clean down to the head, and up here you want to get off the heavy corrosion and all that so it can sit flat against there and be bolted up properly. Once you get it cleaned out, the whole gasket surface clean, I do a wipe of brake clean, and I'll also blow out the holes for the threads and the ports really well, and I'll do a final wipe with brake clean. Now going back in, what you got to realize, with a better view there, is that the ports they're not square, they're not round, let's just say. They have a flat point down below there, so it's like a little dome. So you want to make sure you match your gaskets up the same way. And what I do, these can go basically any way, flip-flopped, but keep the flat part at the bottom. I do them the same way Ford does. I keep the Ford logo and part number facing this way, so it would go just like this on there. Okay, this is how I do it, okay? No studs in, no gaskets in place, and we'll start putting this manifold deep down inside of here, and we'll twist it and get it in place. Get it initially in place here. Just try to not get the gasket surface dirty on here. Now what I do to get pushed down on that Y pipe and align this a little bit better is I'll go ahead and I'll move it around with it just like this, and you can move it up and down and all kinds of stuff because we're putting pressure off the collector here, so it's kind of holding up for us. And then you can go ahead and get your first one in here. And you just move it around until it seems it should work on there. This one I can see is a little bit low. We'll move it up. And right there, we're in. Okay? In by hand, we're not cross-threading. You can put in just a few threads with your ratchet. Now what this does is it holds the pressure against the Y pipe for us when we're getting the gaskets in. So we can do the front side here, which is a whole separate gasket and studs, at least the top 2. And we can come back here, take this out, and put our gasket in back here. So you can see with it like that, it's all holding it for us. Okay, pull down just enough. The D-shaped port, flat side down. Just pull it back enough so you don't scratch it up. And then like right here, I'm gonna face it the right way, we're going to put it in here. Okay, there we go. And then we'll push it back up. And then voila. I know my hand's in the way. But boom, you can see I'm tightening it by hand down there because the other side's aligning it for us. So you can just get these in by hand. Make sure the gasket's in there correctly. And you get the second one aligned. If you need to, pry up on the bottom of it just a little bit. so we can pick the front up on here. And this is why it's so critical to have these threads cleaned out, because you're kind of, you're putting it by hand. You don't want it dragging and all that. So now with these front two holding it in place and supporting the front of it and squaring it up and putting that pressure down to the collector for us, we can go ahead and start pulling out this stud right here. Okay, get it out of the way. And then we're gonna do the same exact thing. We're gonna pull it down just enough so we can get the gasket in here and start putting it back in there. And again, just be careful with the gasket. You don't want to mangle it. And we'll get through the eyelid on there. And just with hand pressure, I'm holding it back and down towards the collector so it goes in there nice and straight on there. Okay, that one's nice and straight. Pressure out. This one's a little cocked, but that's why I put it in by hand. It's really hard to damage threads when you're doing this by hand. So we'll pull this one out, okay? And this one we know is good to go, right? So this one, of course, is a little bit harder to turn because it has a lot of pressure on it, but we know it's going in straight. Very obvious. So we'll go ahead and put this in. Like so. Just get it in there a couple threads, and then we'll go after this one once again. There we go. You can get the right length pry bar in here, and then you smash your hand, and it makes for good videos, I guess. Now this one I know is definitely in there. No question about it. Now at this point, before going down below, you see there's pressure on these studs, and of course down the collector there's no reason to put nuts in just yet. You can put a nut on or two and just get it held in there. You know, so it doesn't just fall off. But with all the pressure on here, it's pretty hard for it to fall off. And with all four of these up here good to go, they're going in correctly, okay? The ones down below are going to be 10 times easier. You should just screw right in. You're ready to trace the threads, gaskets lined up, gaskets on correctly. So we'll just snug these down, all four across the top, and then we're going to come back and do our best to fit a torque wrench in here and torque them. I could just tighten them by hand, but it is an aluminum head, so I like to torque them down. And you know, worst comes to worst, you can kind of feel when it stops and you give it a little bit more on these. Important thing is getting them in there correctly. Okay, all top studs are in, new manifolds in. We're all lined up with the downpipe there. Gaskets are in correctly. Let's go down below and do the same exact thing we did up here. Install the studs only. Okay, now once all your studs are in, go ahead and make sure your gasket is still installed correctly. Of course, it lines up with the holes in the studs, but more importantly, right here in between on both of them, you can read you know, the Ford logo and the part number, and it'll be the correct orientation on there, upright. At that point, go ahead and make sure that your collector of your manifold matches the Y pipe. Boom, good to go. At that point, we can go ahead and start putting these nuts on here. I like to go along in torque sequence and tighten with the little 1/4" ratchet, 13 mil of course, and just snug them down. Start snugging them down evenly all the way across before we start torquing it down to this high torque value. And the reason being is that the torque value is so high, the front's not torqued, flopping in the wind, we're back here torquing this thing down big time. It's not a good idea. So I snug them down all the way from back to front. Now the torque spec on here is 216 inch-pounds for these nuts right here. The torque sequence is very simple. It's from the back to the front, top to bottom. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so forth all the way to the front there. What I do is I torque through, okay, in sequence like 4 at once, and then I'll go back through and I'll torque it again, okay, as the gasket settles. Then after I drive it, make sure there's no leaks and good stuff like that, a drive cycle or two, warm-up cycle, I'll come back and I'll retorque these just to make sure in case they settled anymore, compressed anymore, the gasket, with the heat cycles. And then I'll ensure a leak-free connection on here. And then once all your pieces are back together, heat shields and etc. for your model year, starter, it should sound like this. Nice and quiet, unlike new.
Okay, not so bad, right? Yeah, I know. It was a real pain, but you'll be glad when it's done and it sounds like a brand new quiet vehicle. Now what I actually did at that top stud on number 4 that was sub-flush, I actually extracted it using a drill and an easy out and a little bit of heat. I have a whole video on how I did that. It's the best practice I've ever come across to getting these out, loosening them and getting them out of there when they're flush or sub-flush like that. And of course I'll link to that down below. That's all for now. Hopefully it's helped.